Good evening, everybody. This will be probably, well, we're hoping this will be our last live stream that we have without everybody here. Next Wednesday, the plan is to have a Bible study here at 7. And we're going to ask everybody to wear a mask. We're going to do that in our fellowship hall so that we can distance everybody out. We are going to attempt to live stream that as well, so even if you're not able to come, we're going to try to get that set up so that we can also live stream the Bible class with the people here. So hopefully you'll tune in for that. If you're able to make it on Wednesday evening and have a Bible study with us, that'd be great too. We look forward to seeing you then. I've been tired this week. I've had a rough week sleeping, was struggling with ideas that I wanted to talk about this evening. And one of the things that I considered was talking about all this hate that's going on in our country and how different things are happening, and the way to overcome that is with love. And I just couldn't get the thoughts together the way I wanted to. I did hear one thing that was a little disturbing, talking about, we were talking about hate speech before and the cancel culture, and there is a group out there that's attempting to get some of the things that we hold dear as far as our stance on different beliefs in the church. They're trying to get those things to be considered hate speech. So if that's the case, that's going to cause us issues, but that's not going to stop us from telling what God's word really is. So I'm hoping that those things don't come about, but the way things are going, it's not looking great. So that's something to consider, I guess, when we choose leaders for our next round of voting, that we find godly people that will direct us back to God, so that we can avoid those types of things where we're being persecuted from our own government. So that's something to consider. But what I decided to go with this evening is I was thinking about how we treat our brothers and sisters, especially when it comes to someone that is struggling with something or a sin they may be caught up in. I feel like when I was younger, the idea was that you took the Bible and bashed them over the head with it and said, you're living wrong, you got to change this, and you really got on that person. Now, I don't think that was something that was intended to hurt that person, but I think sometimes the approach that we might have had might have done a little more harm than good, because if you think about it, if you got somebody constantly coming up to you and pointing out everything that you're doing wrong constantly, your first thing to do is become defensive. And when they're defensive, nobody's going to listen to you because they're backing off, trying to avoid whatever the conflict is. And I think it's important that we evaluate how we talk with our brothers and sisters that are struggling with things. And that brings to mind in Matthew chapter 7 about, when you're pointing out the speck in someone else's eye and you've got this beam in your own, you need to make sure you get that beam out of the way so that you can help them. Because all of us struggle with different things. Everybody's got something that they're tempted by or that they're struggling with. And mine may be totally different than yours. I may not have a problem with whatever you struggle with, and you may not have a problem with what I struggle with. And it's important that we realize that and we say, you know what? Let's talk about this. Let's see what we can do to help each other so that we can get past this and do the things that God wants us to do. I want to start out with Galatians chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 1. And it says, Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest they also be tempted. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if a man think himself to be something, when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. But let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For every man shall bear his own burden. The part that I really want to pull out of this is in verse 1, where it's talking about those that are stronger, that are spiritually strong, approach the other person and restore them with meekness. Make sure that we're doing it in love, that we're doing it with meekness, so that we don't pound them over the head with the Bible and scare them off, but we say, look, brother, I know that you're struggling with this right now. What can I do to help you? How can we help you remedy this? Do it in love. Don't come across like you're better than them, that you don't have issues and you're gonna bring them back. That I don't think that approach works as well. But if you go to that person and say, look, I realize you're struggling with this. What can we do to help you? Because I think that when you come at it with meekness and humbleness, then it makes it so much easier to help that person work with whatever the issue is that they need to correct. And I'm not saying that we don't do things to help people correct whatever their issue may be, because I think that's something that we need to do. But I think we have to make sure that we do it in a way that person is restored. Because if we don't, we can push that person away, and that doesn't do us any good or them any good. It says in verse 2 about bearing one another's burdens, helping each other get through it so we can fulfill the law of Christ. And the other one is in verse 3 that I wanted to point out was, if someone thinks that he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. I guess what it's saying really is that you don't want to get yourself in a position where you think that I'm all good, I don't have any issues, and I'm something special, and it's like, well, no, you're really not. You have issues of your own. So you need to make sure that you don't deceive yourself into thinking that you're good when you have issues that you also need to work on and to fix in your own life. Let's go ahead and go to Luke chapter 18, because I want to go back to this to look at kind of an example that Jesus has in this parable of basically how things should be done and how they should not be done. In Luke chapter 18, starting in verse 9. And it says, And he spake the parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee, and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not like other men, as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, and even as this publican. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. This is the example of how not to do it. I mean, if you think about the way he's talking, it's like, well, look how great I am. Look at the great things I've done, and at least I'm not like this guy. And I think that sometimes that's an easy thing to fall into, because as Christians, it's a lot easier for us to sit back and notice the things, the way other people are living that are not, and think, oh, I'm in good shape. Look, I'm doing good things, so I'm in a good position, and I'm not like these other people over here. Well, they're also children of God, and we need to do the best we can to encourage them, and not get a big head thinking that how great we are because we think that we're righteous. All of us need God's grace, and let's go on to how we should be reacting. Instead of thinking that we're something, let's look at how we ought to be, and that's in verse 13. It says, And the publican standing afar off would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. That's the way we should approach things, with humbleness, realizing that we're not perfect, realizing that we need God's help just as much as everybody else does. We may be stronger at times in certain things than other people, but we also still need to approach the Lord because He's the one that gives the forgiveness and the mercy. And then it says in verse 14, it says, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. So God wants us to be humble in the way that we approach things, whether it's helping other people, whether it's pleading for the sins that we've committed and asking God for His help. But we need to make sure that we approach it in the right way. We don't come across as being self-righteous and better than people when we're trying to help them and restore them. It's important that we approach our brothers and sisters in love so that we can restore them back to their relationship with God. That's really the thought that I have for this evening. I know it's a little shorter than normal, but hopefully it's some things that we can look at and consider. And I guess I'm hoping that we get to see you next week when we have our Bible class here at the building at 7. Talk to you later. Bye.